Hey guys, it's Julian, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make bangin' techno like Dents and Pika. So I'm going to be giving away the project file and samples from this video in the description for free, so make sure to go check that out. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there, because they'll be available so you can download them without a download gate. And yeah, let's get started. So, the first sound we have here is the kick, which sounds like this. And so with this kick, I was really trying to make a sort of more like intense one. With Dents and Pika's tracks, they have like these really nice sort of like, I guess you would say like more textured kicks. Like they're very colorful and they're very, like I said, textured. Like they aren't just like the basic reverb kick. And so the way that I achieved this was through a few different methods. So the first thing that I've got in the chain here is I've got a 909 kick. And what I did was I took this sample, and I'll play this for you without any effects. I basically just did a bit of stuff to it inside of Simpler. So here's what it sounds like. So here's what the original sample sounds like. And then here's what it sounds like in here. So what I did with this kick was I pitched it down a bunch, just kind of sounded a little bit better, going through the saturation and the reverb and all that kind of stuff. And then I put a pitch envelope on it. And what the pitch envelope does is it allows you to kind of create more of a punch at the start. With a 909 kick, it hits pretty hard. Like, that's got a pretty nice punch at the start, but I wanted this to be a bit, like, darker sounding, and to get those really, like, hard-hitting, clicky kind of techno kicks. Yeah, that's basically the key, is just to use, like, a pitch envelope where it just goes from up high to down low very quickly. You can see I've got the decay time set. Yeah, very quick. I've also got the amplitude envelope kind of set like this. Pretty straightforward stuff there. And yeah, then after that, I've just got a bit of saturation. You can see I've turned the drive up a bit, and I've got the analog clip set like this. So you can hear this is really helping to solidify this as like a really hard-hitting, like just kind of thumpy kick. And yeah, it just kind of helps with that sound. So then after that, I have this reverb kick rack. This is something that I've made, or I've shown you guys in a few other videos. I'm going to include it in the project files and samples for this, of course. But yeah, basically all this is just this pretty simple rack. So we've got two chains. We've got this first one here, which is sort of like the wet chain, and then we've got the dry chain. So the dry chain, there's just the dry signal coming through, and then we're blending this with the wet chain. So what I've got on here, first off, is I've got this reverb, which is set like this. I've got the dry wet at 100%, since this is the wet chain. That's fine to do. I've got the decay time mapped to this macro, actually, so you can play around with it there. And then, yeah, that's really it. I changed the quality to high. I turned off all these things, and pretty simple there. This is just kind of where, like, the reverb part of the reverb kick comes from. If I turn off the other stuff, you can hear. Yeah, that's where the reverb comes from. Then the next thing I have on there is an amp, which is distorting it, and it's kind of like bringing up that nice low end a bit more. If you listen to this, you can hear it's still kind of a reverby mess, but there's a lot more of that rumbling low end in there. And then this last thing here is just a low pass filter, which just takes that low rumbly stuff. So now we have just the rumble part, and if you blend it with the dry signal, aka the dry chain, like I showed you a second ago, there you go, you get a nice reverb kick. And then, like I said, the goal with this one was just to make it a bit like harder and a bit more textured. And yeah, so that's how I did the reverb. The next thing that we have on here is a saturator, which is at the end of the chain, I guess. And that's really like giving it that harder, kind of more gritty texture. So the way that I'm using this is I've got a little bit of drive, and then I've got the wave shaper down here. I turn up the depth on that, and that's what's really giving it that like oomph, you know? So then the last thing I have on there is just an EQ8. I'm boosting up the low end a little bit. It still wasn't quite powerful enough for me. Again, I just wanted those like really, really hard, deep kind of kicks. So yeah, you can hear it subtle, but it's really helping with those sub 100 hertz frequencies. So that's it for the kick. The next thing I have here is this first hi-hat, which sounds like this. And so something that I noticed in a lot of Dents and Pika's tracks is they have these really cool kind of like hi-hat loops where it's not just like a hi-hat playing 16 notes like going tick-tick-tick. It's like something a little bit more interesting. And so that's what I wanted to create here. So the way I made this was I took this hi-hat sample, just kind of like a short one, and I put it in the simpler, and you can see I've got it pitched down a little bit here, and then I'm doing this kind of pattern with it. If I turn off the echo, you can hear it more. So just like that standard kind of like techno ride pattern where you have all the quarter notes a little bit down in velocity and then these upbeats are a little bit louder. And then what I did here was I just put it through this echo, which is on 16 notes. And there you go, you get kind of like a cooler pattern. And it's still got that like high energy 16th note feel to it, but it's just not so like obvious, I guess you would say. Like this is a little bit more interesting. So yeah, that's all this is. I basically just took this hi-hat, did that little pattern. I've got a bit of saturation here as well. You can see I turned up the drive a bit. I wanted this to be a bit grittier. So that's the purpose of that. And then, like I said, the echo there. And then the last thing I have on there is just an EQ8 cutting out the line, because sometimes with those echoes and with the saturation as well, you can kind of get some nasty line. So the next layer we've got here is the second hi-hat, which is made of 2 layers, and it sounds like this. So with this, I was really going for one of those like harder, more like raw sort of techno hi-hats. Something that I don't think I've talked about in a lot of my tutorials, and something that I've noticed in my own time producing, is a lot of times in like real techno tracks that you hear, like stuff by Dense and Pika and stuff that, like I said, just like real techno tracks that aren't just like demos. They tend to have like actually really hard hitting hi-hats. Like if you listen to this, it really like cuts through like that. Like it's not just a little bit of like hard mid-range / high-end. It's like really like that sharp kind of hi-hat sound. So that was the goal here. I layered these two together and I was just trying to make a little bit more of a detailed sound. So I'll show you the layers and then I'll show you the group processing. The first layer we have here is this one. This is sort of like where the harder part of the sound comes from. Basically, I just took this hi-hat sample. That one, which already you can hear, pretty much had the seed for the kind of sound we wanted. And then I cut out a bunch of low end on it with this EQ8. And then after that, I just added a bit of saturation to give it a bit more grit. And just kind of bring it out a little bit more, as you can hear. Then the second layer in here is this hi-hat, which sounds like this. So this one's a bit softer. This one's more like in the mid-range. I guess like high mids, you can see. But yeah, this one's just giving it that like shaker kind of texture. So on this one, what I've got is actually just a sample you can see, and then I've got that one going through a high pass with this EQ8. So those are the 2 layers. And then on the group, like I said, I've got a bit of processing. So the first thing I have is this reverb. I like to put a little bit of reverb on my open hi-hats like this. You can hear it. It kind of just helps bring it to life and give it a little bit more space. It's not a whole lot of reverb. The dry wet's only at 28%, and the decay time isn't super high, but like I said, I feel like it's just one of those subtle things that helps to really bring it to life. The next thing I've got on there is the saturator, which set like this, I really just turn up the drive a bit. This is really just on here to kind of bring out that sharpness I was talking about. And you can hear it's like night and day. It really brings out that intensity. And then the last thing I've got here is just an EQ8 cutting out a bunch of low end. I know I had done it on the other ones, but I figured I'd use some saturation and some reverb, so might as well do it at the end of this chain as well. So those are the hi-hats. Then the next sound we have here is this little noise thing, which sounds like this. So it's actually really simple. It's just like this noise sample that I had. That one. And I just took it in here, and you can see, I'll do it again. You can see, I just took this first half and just kind of looped it over and over, and then I turned up the volume a little bit as well. So yeah, really simple, and what this is adding is just a bit of texture. Like, again, I was saying, like, with Dense and Pika's tracks, they tend to have really, like, textured, colorful, characterful kind of tracks, and this is a really good way to do that. Like, having this noise in here just adds, like, an extra kind of element that you really can't get from, like, synthesis. I mean, I suppose you could synthesize this sound with a synthesizer, but like, you don't get this just from playing around with saw waves and square waves and distorting kicks and hi-hats. So yeah, it's just adding like a nice kind of texture on top of the sound. And it helps to fill the space a little bit too, because it's a pretty sparse track, as a lot of their tracks tend to be. And if you listen to it without that, it's good, but it's not like, it's not got a whole lot of super interesting stuff other than this, so I like to have something like this in there to kind of solve that problem. Then for the processing on this one, I've just got a bit of saturation. You can see I'm making it kind of a bit grittier using that if I turn it off. It's a lot thinner sounding and just not as powerful and textured. And then I have this auto pan. What this is doing is it's just kind of doing that fake sidechain pulse. You hear this is kind of got like that sidechain bouncing off of the kick type of sound. And yeah, so the way I did this is just using this auto pan, like I said. I've got the phase at 0, so it's only affecting the volume, aka the mono signal. And then we've got the saw waveform, and I've inverted it, so it's kind of like going up like that. And yeah, this is just because, like, with this kind of kick, you don't really want to, like, you wouldn't really want to sidechain something to that. It can just get kind of messy, and I mean, to be honest, you just won't really hear the sound that you're sidechaining to it because of all the reverb there. So this gives you that kind of sidechain kick sound, but it's a little bit more controllable. So then the last sound we have here is this lead, which sounds like this. So I made this to kind of play at the start of every like 4, or I guess it could be every 8 bars as well. It's just kind of one of those things. I've talked about this a lot in my videos, but with techno, a lot of times you want to have some kind of sound like this that's sort of like a bookmark. Like this comes up again at the start of every 4 or 8 bars, or however you would want it to be in your track. And it just kind of reminds you, like, hey, this is going, it's restarting again, essentially. Like, the loop is starting over again. Because when you have such repetitive and sort of, I mean, really, like, fast-paced music as this, it can kind of become, like, a blur pretty easily, like, all the different parts. Because it's just happening over these, like, half-note and one-bar loops that, like I said, just get very repetitive. So, having something like this that comes in, again, it's a nice, like, bookmark in your track, to put it that way. So then for the notes here, I'll show you. I was just playing this thing. It's honestly pretty simple. It's just kind of like this dark thing in C minor. Really simple there. Just kind of threw some notes in there that I thought sounded cool. Luckily, this track didn't have a whole lot of stuff like musically going on, I guess, because it is kind of like that more percussive style of techno. But there was a lot of room to move around with this, or kind of like wiggle room. And so then the way I made the sound was using analog. So we've got one saw wave here. You can see I've got it up an octave. And then that's going into this low-pass filter. The low-pass filter has a bit of an envelope on it. You can hear that in the sound. It's just like a pluck kind of sound. Then I've got that going into the amp envelope, which is also set like a pluck. And then I've got, to finish it off in analog here, I've just got a bit of vibrato. You can see I actually used quite a bit of it. I really like what it does to the sound. Like how it makes it kind of more like warbly and sort of spacey. And then I've just got a bit of unison as well to kind of like give it more of that chorusy sort of effect. And this adds kind of a cool texture to it as well. Then the next thing I've got on here is this echo. And the echo is set like this. I've got it on dotted eighth notes. I got the dry wet at almost halfway, at almost 50%. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I also turned up the low pass filter a little bit, so you can hear this is just giving it that delay that you hear. And the cool thing with this is since it's such a sparse sound, like it only plays every so often in the track, you can have like a little bit more echo on it and have it be a bit more spacey because there's room for it in the track. Like it's not going to get in the way of the next part of whatever this will be playing. Then after that, I've just got a bit of reverb. You can see set like that. Again, pretty simple with this one as well. Just giving it like a bit more space. And I like the texture it kind of gets going into the saturator. So the next thing that we have on here is the saturator. And the saturator is set like this. So you can hear this quite prominently. It's really adding a lot of grit to the sound and giving it like a lot of texture. If I turn it off, you can hear it's a bit bland sounding. So this is just kind of giving this a more interesting feel. Something I was noticing when I heard a lot of Dents and Pika's tracks is they do use sounds that you could say are kind of like stereotypical, like saw waves and square waves and like plucks and pads and all that kind of stuff. But they do a really, really good job of adding like interesting textures and kind of like vibes to the sounds. And so the way that I've accomplished this here is, like I said, just using the saturator at almost the end of the chain. And what it's doing is it's just kind of like adding that grit, like that distorted kind of vibe to the sound where it almost sounds kind of sampled. Like it sounds like a cool synth, but it's got like just a bit more character to it than just like a basic saw wave pluck. So the last effect I have on that pluck, or on the lead there, is this EQ8. And all this is doing is cutting out a bit of low end, and then I boosted the high end a little bit as well because I just felt like it would fit into this track a little bit better that way. There was kind of some room for something in those like high highs, so I boosted those. So that's pretty much it for this one, guys. I just want to show you some techniques on how to make music like Dents and Pika. So that's going to be it for today, guys. Make sure to let me know what you think of this video in the comments, and make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. Once again, you can get the project file and samples and MIDI presets from this video in the description for free. So make sure to check those out. And if you're a patron on my Patreon at any tier, check there because they'll be available. Thank you so much, everybody. I've been really appreciating all the support lately. I love you all, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.